Hello world and welcome to the program. This is Alex and the new episode of Ukrainian Unleashed, a podcast where you'll get along with Ukrainians and also observe how the global scenery impacts Ukrainian society in these exciting times. We speak about events, trends, individuals and lifestyles of modern Ukrainians. So let's jump right in. Hi everyone. Hopefully you have been waiting for hot stories about summer travels. Yes, I know that there are still 6 months until the beginning of summer, but when to tell terrific summer tales if not in winter? So in this episode, you will join me on my trip to the city of Turnopil, which I visited this August with my friend. We left Odessa at the end of August, and for getting to Turnopil, we traveled through 6 regions, visited 4 cities and already felt the approaching of autumn. Heading from the south to north, you can feel the sun becomes less hot and the leaves turn yellow. So catch up with my journey from southern to western Ukraine. I will try to picture western Ukraine through the prism of my own perception, of course. How did I like the city and the people? And what is different about Odessa and Ternopil and what they both have in common? Which city is more successful in meeting economic and social challenges, and why? Are you ready for this? Let's go! Well, going to Turnopil, I realized that I know almost nothing about this city. Yes, I have been to Lviv many times, which is located only 130 kilometers from Turnopil. I also visited Ivano-Frankivsk, which is a nearby city. But for some reason, I've never come to Turnopil, until this summer. By the way, from a historical and geographical point of view, Turnopil belongs to Galicia, one of the largest historical provinces of Ukraine you definitely should visit. And the ethnographic borders of Volyn and Podylia are traversing only 30 kilometers from the city. Therefore, this region is very picturesque, as you can imagine. We can even say that it is the key to understanding Western Ukraine and its features. And it turned out that Turnopil is really one of the most interesting cities of it. Located in the very center of Western Ukraine, this shiny city has absorbed the unique spirit of Galicia, the beauty of Podylia, and the tranquility of Volhynia, pictured in its Austrian architecture as well. Ukrainians also call it Fine City, evoking in their minds the song written by a rock band Brati Gadukini. So if Ukrainians are listening to me now, they are probably smiling because we have a well-known song dedicated to it. Turnopil has a deep and rich history, connected, first of all, with its ancient castle, which served not only for defending against Turks and Tatars in the 16th, 17th centuries, but also as a residence of the local rulers. Now it is the oldest building in the city, under which you may find a whole system of dungeons. However, Turnopil is interesting not only for its castle and numerous churches, but also for its architecture with typical narrow streets and Austrian houses that have preserved the spirit of antiquity. A lot of monuments to well-known personalities like Ukrainian opera singer Solomia Krushelnitska and other literary figures may also be found here. Among other things, Turnopil is also famous for its rich festival and fair tradition. The city hosts various festivals every year, the largest of which is the Fine City International Music Festival. By the way, I told you about it in one of the previous episodes of my podcast called Party Like Ukrainian. Well, Odessa historically also has something to boast about, although the city was officially founded only 2 centuries ago. 226 years ago to be exact. But in fact, the history of Odessa dates back to the late 14th, early 15th century, when the northwestern Black Sea coast came under the rule of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Also, Odessa was called Kotzebue and until 1795 Hadji. Those who listened to a recent episode of my podcast about the trip to Ackerman Fortress, I think remember how perplexed was the story of Ukrainian South. From the end of the 15th century, when these lands were conquered by the Ottoman Empire, the local population consisted mainly of Tatars. In 1765, the Ottoman authorities rebuilt the old Lithuanian fortress, having called it Yenidunia. For those who have already been to Odessa, if you are visualizing it now in your minds, the fortress was located just between the modern Potemkin Stairs and the Vorontsov Palace on Primorsky Boulevard. It was repeatedly attacked by the Zaporizhian Cossacks those times as well. In 1774, the fortress was first captured by the combined Cossack-Russian troops, while after that the construction of south gates began at this place as opposed to north gates, which at that time was the Russian Empire's capital St. Petersburg called. But despite the completely different origins, the architecture of Odessa and Turnopil is very European and belongs to the last 200 years. Odessa is distinguished by the efforts of Italian and French masters to recreate the Mediterranean style in urban planning, but deliver it in an imperial manner because the plans for construction were quite promising. Turnopil did not have such an ambition. It becomes immediately obvious when you enter the city. First of all, you notice its calmness and decency, and these can be recognized in the architectural style. Neat and simple, mostly 3-story houses. I admired them so much that I even filmed it for about 4 hours on my smartphone with a stabilizer, just to release a cool video upon my return. Honestly, I haven't gotten around to it yet, but in my plans to finish it by the end of the year. Therefore, Ternopil is a small city. The historical center of Odessa, I think, is 4 or 5 times bigger. In terms of population, it is also inferior to Odessa, 225,000 inhabitants against 1 million. And this, of course, shows us the significant differences in urban planning and urban landscape. Maybe some even could say that I shouldn't compare these two. Turnopil is a student's capital. We were greeted by a board hanging at the entrance to the city. Turnopil strives for youth, brightness and easy living. Here you immediately see young people walking around the city during the day and in the evening hanging out in bars. Married couples slowly marching with their kids among the historical monuments. The castle in Turnopil is very small and looks more like a mansion. By the way, Odessa also had its own castle, if we can call it so, the fortress of Yenidunia, which was just destroyed before the founding of the city. But judging by the maps, its appearance and scale were quite remarkable. But hold on a second, I think you are still interested in learning more about people than the buildings, because first of all, human vibes create the atmosphere of any city, don't they? The population of Odessa consists of mostly Ukrainians with a significant part of Russians. But the main language of communication is Russian. There were many historical reasons for that, so we will not dwell on it now. Maybe I will tell you more about this in another episode. We'll see. So, in total, representatives of 133 nationalities and ethnic groups live in Odessa region. This is over 37% of its population. Bulgarians, Moldovans, Romes, Gagauz and Jews stand out from the largest ethnic groups. Currently, there is a tendency to reduce the public dialogue between authorities and representatives of different nationalities, unfortunately. There is some tension with the public perception of the Romes as well. But all national communities of the region have their own formalized cultural and educational services, like schools with local languages. In contrast, in Turnopil, 90% of the population are Ukrainians, and the ethnic composition is less diverse. I think this is a prerequisite for creating a more or less homogeneous community of people who share similar values and culture. This certainly provides better conditions for mutual understanding and produces a higher level of public trust. But not only this can affect public welfare, of course. Let's also look at the economic situation of the two regions. For example, the main ports are concentrated in the south of the country, and in some border areas there is a special vulnerability for corruption to strive and criminal structures to influence the political processes. In some areas in the west, providing services, including information technology, plays an important role in the structure of the economy. Such industries attract foreign investment, so the business owners are less interested in the political life of the region. Thus, political competition in these regions suffers somewhat less from the influence of large business interests than in most other regions of Ukraine. In result, this also affects the level of security. The southern regions of Ukraine are particularly prone to such risks. In Odessa, in general, civil society activists can operate safely as long as they don't address sensitive issues such as corruption, potentially illegal activities of local authorities, such as land allocation or illegal construction, for example, or any other procurement procedures. There is no open pressure from local authorities on entrepreneurs, but in tenders initiated by the Odessa City Council and other city councils in the region, companies being close to the politicians generally win. There is no secret that as a result, the region's population loses a lot due to corruption. And this is a corruption tax we all pay, as we say. The small and medium businesses have opportunities for acting freely in general. But the more connected local governments and businesses are, the more dangerous anti-corruption activities can be. In the Transparency of Ukrainian Cities 2019 ranking, published by Transparency International Ukraine, Turnopil took third place and Odessa only 20th. Most major cities in the Odessa region also occupy low places in the ranking. Plus, the course of decentralization and unification of communities in the Odessa region is moderate, in contrast to Western Ukraine. According to the decentralization.gov.ua source, Turnopil region, for example, ranks 10th out of 24 possible. Odessa region in the same ranking took only 19th place. Local authorities simply do not pay enough attention to these processes. In general, if we look at ranking of the most comfortable Ukrainian cities for living, published by Focus magazine, we will see that the top 5 cities in Ukraine would be 4 Western Ukrainian cities. They are Khmelnytsky, Lviv, Rivne, and Turnopil. Odessa took the 12th place out of 20 possible. So in terms of economic development, quality of infrastructure, ecology, security, social development, we lag far behind Turnopil. And this despite the fact that in the Turnopil region, the official salary is one of the lowest in Ukraine, believe me or not. Yes, only 9,700 hryvnias per month, and that's the equivalent of about $350. For comparison, in the Odessa region, this indicator is 11,100 hryvnias or $410 based on the current exchange rate. All this reveals obvious problems that my city has, unfortunately, despite the huge economic and cultural potential for development. What do you think prevents it? Of course, like in the other countries, there are a lot of regional differences in Ukraine, mostly in the economic situation and culture, but this does not interfere with the peaceful life of Ukrainians. The Kalmios Group, in partnership with GFK Ukraine, conducted an all-Ukrainian poll 2 years ago to find out what unites and divides Ukrainian citizens. The results showed that 70% of Ukrainians surveyed see both significant and insignificant differences between regions. I also saw them during my trip to Turnopil, although I believe that if Ukrainians have a common desire to become a state governed by the rule of law with a high level of public trust, much of them will disappear. Also, according to the respondents, the West and the East stand out the most among other regions in Ukraine. Interestingly, almost 46% of respondents in Western Ukraine agreed that they are more different from others. While being in Turnopil, I saw how much more people care about the development of the places where they live, houses, streets, districts. I'm not talking about the level of local self-government, but one's own household level. And the results of the last local elections also demonstrate this high level of attentiveness. Turnopil region was one of the most active in voting, with 45% of citizens visited polling stations during elections. In the Odessa region, 10% fewer people came to vote, only 35% in total. My impressions of Turnopil were very vivid. Yes, the weather was good and it was summer and everything there was unknown to me. But there is something that may not be measured and expressed in numbers. This is true happiness I saw in people's eyes. Of different ages and wealth. People were smiling, calm, they lived their lives and enjoyed it. I saw them in the parks, watching them communicate in the shops, in the cafes, and everywhere I went. Maybe happy people are attracted to Turnopil and made it so comfortable for living. Or perhaps because the city provides good conditions for coexistence, it makes people so happy too. Well, I haven't figured it out yet. Perhaps one of the most objective indicators to consider here is to check on the crime statistics in both regions. Let's do that. I think this is a paramount indicator that you need to pay attention to understand whether my impression of Turnopil is not misleading. So I turned to crime statistics for the past 10 years and saw that in the Turnopil region, this figure is twice lower than the average in Ukraine. In the Odessa region, unfortunately, sometimes it's even higher. Yet, there are strong personal ties between the West and the South that can break stereotypes. Here, look. Of course, within 6 years of the Revolution of Dignity, Ukraine has carried out far-reaching reforms aimed at strengthening democratic governance and accountability. But let's be honest, despite significant progress in areas such as preventing corruption, public procurement and decentralization, the country maintains an alarmingly low level of trust in government institutions. In Odessa, it sometimes reaches 70%, according to UNDP study. However, the Kalmios Group survey shows that 2/3 of the population, which is nearly 66%, have personal connections, relatives, friends, colleagues, neighbors, and other acquaintances with people from Western Ukraine. For example, despite some differences, currently 88% of the Ukrainian population as a whole considers it necessary to implement European standards and raise welfare level in Ukraine to European. This can be a strong unifying factor for the whole country. Don't you agree with me? I spent 3 wonderful days in Turnopil. For me, traveling in Ukraine is still about discovery and enlightenment. Honestly speaking, I have already visited 23 countries around the world, but still have not been able to discover half of the regions of Ukraine. And this is a very big omission, and I wish all of us could know our country better. Traveling from one part of Ukraine to another is especially memorable because it allows us to understand how unknown and native Ukraine can be for each of us at the same time. On my way back to Odessa, I wanted to touch the sea, to feel the sea coast with my feet. But Turnopil was so stunning with its kindness, mutual respect and trust that I definitely wanted to bring it back with me. I think I succeeded to do this. It's in my heart from now on. And thanks to the podcast, I hope now you can feel it too. Thank you for being with me and see you in mid-December. Keep well. This was a new episode of Ukrainian Unleashed podcast. Thanks for being here with me. I also would love to thank Purple Planet for lovely musical compositions used in this episode. We did our best to extend our presence all over the web, so you may find us everywhere wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, check our pages in social media with fresh updates. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram accounts are waiting for you. And finally, a small notice for our Ukrainian listeners. Starting from now, we will be posting a Ukrainian version of all upcoming episodes in our official podcast channel. Both recordings will appear simultaneously, so stay tuned if you like to be updated in the Ukrainian language about the hottest issues we discuss here. Or maybe you'll even choose to listen to both versions. It's up to you. The more options we have, the closer we get. See you very soon, guys.